Hello, comrades. Welcome to Sunday evening's online communist forum. Um, Jack Conner is going to talk for about an hour, as usual. So the advertised topic is assessing Sharm el-Sheikh, all those leaders of different nations sucking up to Trump. And Jack's going to assess that for us and talk about whatever else the PCC wants to report today. Carry on, Jack.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Yeah, at least last time I looked at the news, um, phase one seems to be just about holding up. We've had various accusations from America, but crucially, Israel, that Hamas is violating the ceasefire. I think that this really just does indicate that Netanyahu and the Israeli cabinet were unwilling partners in this ceasefire. Israel clearly wanted the fighting to continue. So, the last thing I heard, I'm sure there are many, many more. Israel killed, a family of 11 because they'd, I think, inadvertently, quite clearly crossed what's called the yellow yellow line. Um, Again, as far as I know, uh, okay. Again, as far as I know, the return of what I'll call captives, both dead and alive, has been done. We've got Israel talking about how Hamas hasn't fulfilled its side here. Hamas, quite reasonably, as far as I see it, says, well, look, people who buried bodies, they're now dead. There will also, of course, be bodies, one would guess, surely, in territory that Israel still occupies, that Hamas can't go to and start, digging using a bulldozer or whatever else they need under rubble to retrieve the dead. Just as a completely subjective response, I have to say I did see some pictures of captives freed from Hamas, and I have to say that they looked extremely fit and healthy. I'm sure that being in a tunnel, being in a tent, being kept in a cellar, must have been truly bloody awful. But remember, this is a siege situation. It's a situation where Israel is pounding using aircraft, missiles, drones, artillery, tanks, and where the Gaza population has been on the edge of starvation. So at least in terms of the pictures I've seen, I haven't seen anyone emerge that's emaciated, that looks like they've suffered, deliberate mistreatment. Now, as I said, that's a purely subjective, view. It's not a scientific view. I haven't gone through every example, but certainly when you look at what Israel has been doing, not least to Greta Thunberg and people on the flotilla, here's a state that isn't suffering siege, that isn't suffering starvation, isn't suffering constant bombing, constant attacks. Look at the Palestinians who are emerging from Israeli prisons. Listen to the testimony of Thornburg. Listen to the testimony of others that were detained by Israel. And remember, these people are in the glare of publicity. So the idea that it's Hamas, which are the savages, and Israel as the upholder. Well, I was about to say of Western values, but then looking at the history of the West, looking at the history of modern colonialism, okay, Israel is the upholder of Western values of genocide, colonialism, oppression. That doesn't mean I'm dressing up, Hamas to be something that they're not. But at least from my angle, what you've got on the one side is resistance, and what you've got on the other is a colonial power intent on deliberately making the population suffer, deliberately setting up the population either for mass starvation or some sort of mass expulsion. Okay, so my angle is that it was clearly Trump. You could start getting into a debate. Was it Trump? Was it not Trump? It was Trump. It was Trump that twisted the arm of the Israeli government. Why did he do that? I think a number of reasons. I think not least of them is the Israeli attack on Doha in Qatar. This was the failed attack on the negotiators, the Hamas negotiators that were looking at the American deal. Israel attempted to take them out and failed. I don't know what Trump said to Netanyahu. I suspect, I suspect he was furious. And it's worth noting, of course, that directly after that attack, Trump signed an executive order instructing the US military to defend Qatar and use all reasonable and legal measures to defend Qatar. And we have now, of course, Saudi Arabia trying to line up to get similar treatment from the United States. People have described it as some sort of NATO equivalent, i.e., if we're attacked, you're attacked. And that's something. That is indeed something. The Financial Times led their report on it that Trump had to choose between Israel and Qatar, and he chose Qatar. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that Trump would prefer an alliance with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Trump certainly hasn't cut Israel off. He's facilitated Israel. But I think it does illustrate, if it needs illustrating, and unfortunately it does for some, the idea that it's Israel that wags the American dog. I think you see the real power relationship here. It's clearly the United States. It's the arms supplier. It's the guarantor. It's the boss. And it was the United States says, look here, we've got to bring a stop to this temporarily, perhaps. But we've got to bring a stop to this. It's causing us too much problem, not only in the Middle East, but I think it would be right to argue that if you look at Western politics, not least in Europe, governments have been under pressure from their own populations. So a range of factors, I think, explain it. Then you've got the question, which I think is the $60,000 question and all the rest of it. Okay, we've sort of had phase one. Will phase one hold? Don't know. Is it possible to go from phase one to phase two? I'm extraordinarily skeptical. I really don't. I really don't see it. The idea that Israel will accept some sort of Palestinian entity, the idea that the Palestinians will accept some sort of colonial rule, even if it's rule by, Palestinians who've been selected by the United States, acting as satraps. I don't find it convincing. And of course, then we've got the question of does Israel want to deliver not just stage one, phase one, or whatever you want to call it, but stage two? And the answer is clearly no. If what is going on in Gaza wasn't enough to give away the game, look at what's going on the West Bank, and what you get in terms of the Western media, to the extent it reports these things, is it's business as usual on the West Bank, and settlers are going around with impunity, attacking Palestinians, driving them off their farms, driving them out of their homes, killing them, intimidating them. That's normal on the West Bank. And so what we've got is an ongoing colonialization of the West Bank. It's true at the moment, Trump has said no annexations. I don't suspect there will be any annexations, but there's de facto annexation. So what's the Jewish population now on the West Bank plus East Jerusalem? 600, 700,000. So this clearly indicates what Israel wants, not just the present government, but all mainstream Zionist parties. When it comes to Hamas, I don't think it's right to say that this is a Hamas victory. If you think that the real war aims of Netanyahu at the beginning, 2 years ago, was to secure the captives and to destroy Hamas, then it's a Hamas victory. But we said at the beginning, and all the evidence is there, that Netanyahu wasn't interested in getting the war captives back. Quite the opposite. He was quite content for having an excuse to carry out this war. And indeed, I've already noted that if you take the last Israeli attack, and it was only the last of a whole series of attacks, if you wanted the war captives back, you need to negotiate with Hamas. Taking aim with, was it 10, 15 missiles at their political office in Doha, you can't square that with my priority is getting war captives back. What about destroying Hamas? Again, anyone who knows anything, and it's there, you can just read it in any intelligent journalistic commentary. You cannot destroy Hamas unless you went out and killed the population of Gaza, and not just stopped there. You went out and you killed the population on the West Bank, and then you went further and you started to kill the population, the Palestinian population in the diaspora. The fact of the matter is that Hamas is rooted in, it's a political movement. It's rooted in Palestinian society. I don't know how popular it is. The last report I read from the West Bank said its popularity had increased. On the other hand, the last report I read, which was about a year ago, how reliable such reports are is a different matter, said its popularity on the West Bank, in Gaza, had decreased. Either way, it's still clear that it's a mass movement, and it's a mass movement in Gaza, it's a mass movement on the West Bank, and it's a mass movement in the Palestinian diaspora. So the idea that you're going to destroy Hamas clearly is a nonsense. Militarily defeat it, that was never a problem, depending on what you mean by military defeat. If you mean have you destroyed it as any sort of fighting formation, no, that's clearly not the case. But if you're talking about putting up serious opposition to Israeli forces, that was never the case. There's no argument on that score. And it's no surprise to me that as soon as Israel withdrew back to phase one's yellow lines, what you saw is Hamas issue instructions to its fighters to regroup. My guess is that they'd been given instructions to operate as individuals or small cells. What you saw is instructions, and my understanding is that they formed their fighting units, 5 brigades, and what they did is they imposed their regime, re-established their regime in Gaza. The idea that a lot of the press are pushing is, oh, well, there's a civil war in Gaza. I don't buy that. I don't view the opposition that we have in Gaza as Fatah or the PLO. No, I mean, again, just going on what I've read, these are criminal gangs or gangs that have been sponsored by Israel. And what you've got, again, using a very, very broad brush, using an analogy, is something equivalent to what happened to those that collaborated with the Nazis in France, that the resistance movement took revenge on them. America complains that you've got extrajudicial measures being taken. Well, it's not a state. We're not talking about a normally functioning society. And in the same way, when the Nazis retreated, the resistance movement took its revenge on overt collaborators. Sometimes that involved tarring and feathering, humiliation. Sometimes it simply involved a bullet, and that's what we've seen. That doesn't surprise me. But the idea of civil war, I just don't buy. And again, when it comes to the question of arms, Gaza is armed. The idea that Hamas is going to lay down its arms, well, if we're talking about AK-47s, no. Maybe they'll have negotiations about rockets, artillery, if they've got any. I don't know. But nothing so far has surprised me. So I'm myself very skeptical about the deal. I would not be surprised if phase one ended in failure, and I would be absolutely flabbergasted if we actually go to phase two, with Tony Blair or whoever it happens to be acting as the new colonial masters. Really, in terms of what's going to happen next in the immediate term, I think is extraordinarily difficult to predict. What I think we can say is Israel certainly hasn't abandoned its project for a greater Israel. I think that's still there. And I think at the first opportunity to actually pursue that aim, that's what we'll see. So I don't know how long it will take before we hear the A word again, the annexation word, but I think we will. Okay, moving on. We've got a huge tsunami of propaganda going on at the moment in Britain around the Israeli Maccabi Tel Aviv football club. Now, the last time I heard of Maccabi Tel Aviv, it was in the context of Amsterdam. And we had a report, I think we published it in the paper, from a comrade in the Netherlands that was telling us what was going on. And according to the comrade there, what you had is Maccabi supporters acting in a deliberately provocative fashion, attacking Muslim-looking taxi drivers, pulling down Palestinian flags. And what that produced is a reaction, not from anti-Semites, as the mainstream Western press, as the Israeli media would have it, as politicians, of the right and the center would have it. What it triggered was pro-Palestinian sentiment. It's like going on a demonstration through central London that is apparently a hate march, that all these people are Jew haters. I think to put that thesis to the test, I was at the front of the demonstration the other week. Usually, early in the demonstration, before it sets off, the organizers have set up what they call their box, which are stewards linking hands. You have the lead banners behind them. And what you had was half a dozen Zionists violently break through this square. They were extremely quickly, ejected. They were carrying, placards. We stand with Israeli Jews, or something along those lines. The idea that these people were in fear of their lives or their safety is risible. And of course, what happened, no surprise, is as soon as an argument starts, about Manchester or whatever it happens to be, what you've got is Jews coming from the demonstration itself and telling these Zionists, don't talk to me about this demonstration being anti-Jewish. I'm Jewish. And this happened next to our friend Mark and their contingent of Holocaust sons and daughters, survivors of the Holocaust. There was an old man I spoke to as a Holocaust survivor, Mark. His parents were Holocaust survivors. The idea that this was a hate march, nothing could be further from the truth. And that's the reality of what happened in Amsterdam. And that's the reality, I think, of what might happen in terms of the Aston Villa game. It's not that people are motivated by Jew hatred. What they're motivated by is solidarity with Palestine. That doesn't mean that if you did, a test and you went round everyone on the demonstration and you went down, to everyone that was protesting, you wouldn't find an anti-Semite. Of course you would. But no, actually, what you've got is pro-Palestinian, and the vast majority of people recognize the difference between Zionism and Judaism. They're quite clear on that. So what do we have from the Labour Party, the Tory Party, the Liberal Democrats, from the BBC, across the board? What we have is this tidal wave of reaction denouncing a police decision to bar these supporters. Usually what politicians say, well, it's an operational matter. It's not for me as a politician. So what's going on here? My own assessment, for what it's worth, because if you look at it in terms of British politics, what the hell is Keir Starmer doing? He's doing the job of Kemi, Badenoch. He's doing the job of the Zionists. What he's doing is doing the job of making sure he's not going to win back the Muslim vote in Britain, or the anti-Zionist vote in Britain. So what's going on? As far as I can see, what you've got, along with phase one and the 20-point plan, is a coordinated response to actually crush, to discredit the anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, pro-Palestine movement and paint it in the colors of anti-Semitism. So, for example, what you've got is Keir Starmer support, standing behind a banner of the Community Services Trust, isn't it? And other such organizations. You've got the description of Amsterdam as the biggest, outburst of anti-Semitism since the 1930s and 40s. All of this is fake news. All of this is a big lie, and of course they're conscious of that. In other words, it's pure cynicism. Okay, wanting to move on. Another ongoing story. The Duck of York can no longer call himself the Duck. Quite frankly, I on one level, I don't give a damn. On the other hand, when you've got a crisis of some sort in the ruling class, when you've got some sort of scandal hitting the ruling class, it would be wrong not to take notice. Fact of the matter is, as far as I can tell, what you've got is the Duke of York, Prince, whatever he calls himself, Prince Andrew, he can call himself that for the moment, acting as an entitled member of the ruling classes. That's the description. I haven't read her book yet, the posthumous book by Virginia Giuffre. She says that Andrew thought it was his right to have sex with her. And I suspect that was right. Did he have sex with her? Of course he did. Can he not remember it? Of course he can. Look, when you look at, these two sides telling a story, she was trafficked, she was recruited, she was vulnerable, he's entitled, he's powerful. Look at the pictures with Maxwell and him. You don't need to be a genius to work out who's telling the truth and who isn't. Did you see? Of course you did. The Panorama, Mathis. Did you see the docudrama? I did. The fact of the matter is that Prince Andrew Windsor, is lying through his teeth. The idea that he remembers buying a pizza on that day more than having sex with someone just isn't credible. All the stuff, I don't remember dancing with her. Of course you don't. The fact that they paid out millions of pounds, surely gives the game away. But the point I would make here is really this idea that what you've got is one rotten apple. I don't buy that. Look, I don't know the Windsors. I've never met them, don't want to meet them. But every time I pick up, a little bit of news on their private behavior, behavior away from, the TV cameras, away from state, occasions, is what you've got is people who are thoroughly unpleasant individuals that treat their servants, treat their, how should I put it, their minions basically with contempt. I mean, I've heard descriptions, I believe them, of the King, Charles Windsor, throwing books at servants. He's annoyed with the servants, so he throws a book at them. I've heard descriptions of, when he changes his clothes, he comes and he just throws them all over the place. He has to have someone, it reminds me of the last emperor of China, he has to have someone who squeezes his toothpaste. I mean, we want to get rid of the whole royal family, not just one individual. The fact is that all of them consider themselves entitled. It's just that in terms of this particular individual, he's been outed because of Jeffrey Epstein, because of Maxwell, and because of the industrial scale of abuse that Epstein presided over. And we've all seen the pictures of Epstein and Trump, Epstein and Clinton, Epstein, is it, and Mandela, I don't know. I'm not accusing any of these people of being involved, but the idea that no one knew about it is impossible to take seriously. If you listen to the evidence given by pilots of his plane, what do they call it? The Lolita Express. That's what the pilots called it. So the idea that people in Epstein's inner circle didn't know what was going on, the idea that Andrew or Fergie didn't know what this guy was up to, or didn't know what Andrew was up to, lacks all credibility. But our response isn't just to say he should lose his royal title. I understand the relatives of Dufresne. Our response must be a Republican response, and that is we don't want kings, we don't want queens, we don't want dukes, we don't want lords, we don't want ladies. Get rid of the lot of it. And okay, if I express myself in this way, I think you'll get where I'm coming from. I understand why the Romanovs were executed. Lenin's idea was to have a show trial of where he would expose the crimes of the Tsar. I don't know whether he would then be shot or traded. I think the idea was that he would be traded with a deal with Britain or whoever it happens to be. Instead, what we had is a white army, and the local authorities there said, "Oh, shoot them," and they were shot. The better fate for these people, I do think, was the Chinese Revolution. And if you look at the film, and I think it's a reasonable description of it, it's not fiction. It's fictionalized, I'm sure. But if you look at the last emperor of China, this is a young man who couldn't tie his own shoelaces. You know, such was his pampered existence. Anyway, you have the revolution. What does the new People's Republic do with this guy? They re-educate him, and they put him to work in Beijing, in the old court as a gardener. And I think, given our present king, that's a useful thing he could do in a democratic republic of England, Scotland, and Wales. When we open up the Buckingham Palace gardens to the public, there you'll see in the background somewhere this old man maybe spraying the I don't know, black fly or white fly or whatever it is on the roses, and trimming the roses, and maybe digging up the potatoes. I don't know. But to me, that's about all the guy is capable of doing. And, I don't wish him ill. As to Andrew, what he ends up doing under a Republican regime, I don't know. Okay. Having mentioned China, we've got again another, I think, coordinated. You've got to, create as much fuss about China as possible. We've got the opposition blaming the government. You've got the government blaming the opposition when it was in government for this spy scandal. Look, I don't know. I've on my bookshelves, I've got copies of John le Carre and Len Dayton and other such stuff. From what I can gather in the real world, most spies pick up absolutely bugger all when it comes to real secrets that exist in James Bond type novels. Most intelligence is actually done by electronic spying, or for that matter, the routine going through from publicly available information. For example, you didn't need to have someone in the Kremlin to know that the Soviet economy was in trouble. You could read the General Secretary's reports. You could read Pravda. You could read Izvestia. It was obvious. In the same way, what were these guys doing in Westminster? Quite frankly, it's tittle tattle. What's going on in the government? Well, this minister doesn't like that minister. This minister really does like that minister. This one's rising, that one's. You could pick up that sort of tittle tattle if you plonked yourself in the House of Commons bar and sat there all day. Okay, they fed this information on to Chinese companies Was it valuable to them? Well, for the sake of, two salaries, perhaps. But the idea that what we're dealing with here is secrets. The idea that we're dealing with state secrets, information vital to the safety of the realm. That is just obviously not true. And in the same way, if we look at this huge scandal over the Chinese embassy, of course it will be used to house spies. I'm sure there will be electronic equipment in the embassy. All you're telling me is, well, does the American embassy in Beijing have spies? Yeah. Does it have electronic equipment to communicate back home with, to monitor what's going on in the capital? I would guess so. Does Russia? Yeah, I would guess so. The reality is what we're dealing with here is a balancing act. And the government, whichever government it is, has to weigh up on the one side, playing ball with the United States and its anti-China campaign. And then it has to weigh up the interests of Britain PLC. Britain is linked in, just like the United States, with the Chinese economy in a way that is nothing like the former Soviet Union. The former Soviet Union traded with the West. You had oil, you had gas, but you didn't have an interlocking of the two systems. You have with China, and that makes it difficult to navigate. I'm not going to comment on the charges against these people, except to say that from what I can gather, the charges are completely over the top. Maybe they expected the defendants to buckle and go in for some plea bargaining. Either way, this is a scandal that again resembles to me the scandal about Maccabi Tel Aviv. This isn't this isn't about vital interests for the safety of the realm. We're not dealing with something like 39 steps, and I don't only see. I have read the book, but I love the film. We're not dealing with something like Mr. Memory taking back vital secrets to your air defense or something akin to that. Okay, moving on. We've had the Zelensky Trump summit in Washington. I don't know whether I expected that to produce tomahawks. I don't know whether that was in Trump's mind. Either way, before the summit had even began, we had the announcement that there's been a very productive phone call between Trump and Putin. And we have the announcement of a summit in Hungary. How the hell, by the way, does anyone know, genuine question, how how Putin is actually going to get to Hungary? Hungary is not a signature, as I understand it, of the ICC, but all the surrounding states are. If you look at how Netanyahu gets to Washington, it's an incredibly complex route to avoid landing somewhere or going over, I should put it, territory of this state or that state. Maybe they blink and don't notice this particular air flight. I don't know. Either way, I expect this summit will happen. What the results will be, I haven't got a clue. What I would say, though, is the idea that much of the mainstream politics in the West, the sort of liberal consensus, has been pushing, and that is that Trump is a sellout. Trump was prepared to give Putin everything he wanted. That Putin thinks he's on a winner. I really don't buy that one. I think Putin rejected the deal for good reasons, and my understanding of the deal was, okay, it's a good deal compared to what Biden was offering, which was complete surrender, complete defeat. What Trump said is, you can keep what you've gained, right? Okay. But what we do is establish a buffer zone along the, is it 800 mile? What is the front line at the moment? Long front line. But what we do is we put European NATO troops in. And what we do is we back it up with American security guarantees. What? So if you're Russia, what you effectively have then is the frontier of NATO move hundreds of miles. And not only up there in the north now, with Finland and all the rest of it, but in Russia's soft underbelly. I can sort of understand under those circumstances, in spite of the generous offer, well, thank you very much, but no thanks. My assessment, again, for what it's worth, I got no inside information. If Putin had gone back to Moscow with a piece of paper and said, peace in our time, he wouldn't have lasted very long. I think the FSB regime in the Kremlin would have retired him to a sanatorium. Maybe he would have had an accident and fallen out one of those high windows that people seem to be so prone to in Russia, or might have even suffered the fate of one leading military opponent of Putin, and that is have an air crash. Either way, I don't think Putin as an individual would have lasted long, because we need to understand that although the regime in Moscow is presented, as an autocracy, as Putin's regime, really what we're dealing with here is a Securicat regime. We're not dealing with an oligarchy. These people, the billionaires, have been put into their place. What we're dealing with is the state machine. Now, what of course you get is the mixing of capital with the state machine. So a lot of these people are hugely rich. Nonetheless, it's the fact they're in the KGB, or the fact that they're head of the army, or they're head of the Air Force. It's that sort of relationship is the key to understanding the nature of the regime. So what happens in Hungary? I don't know. But what I would say is that in terms of the front line, is that what we've seen is a continuation of the stalemate. At the beginning of summer, there was a lot of talk of a Russian offensive. A lot of the pro-Kremlin left were saying, with the fall of Bakhmut, Russian forces will just steamroll forward. Nothing happened. A village here, a village there. Tens of thousands of Russian deaths. What I've reported in the latest article that I've written is, interestingly, the death rate, Russian death rate, this is Ukrainian figures, take it as you will, has gone down. Why is that? Because they're no longer using human wave tactics. You've got small groups, but also note what's going on the battlefield. The battlefield now both resembles World War I, with static front lines, with advances, for every yard of territory we gain, we lose X number of men. But what you've got is a battlefield now dominated by drones. And that's the remarkable change. There's been a revolution in warfare. And what we're dealing with is both ubiquitous presence of drones over the battlefield, resulting in an equal ratio now between injured on the battlefield and death on the battlefield, going from 3 to 1 to 1 to 1. But also note Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian missiles hitting Russian energy production. So 20% drop. Note also the operation of swarms of drones against Russian targets. So 300 drones, of which the majority, of course, will be shot down, but enough get through to have an impact. This war is hugely costly on the battlefield. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I don't see, a dramatic change. But again, who am I? I don't know. I don't know what will be negotiated in Hungary, but I can see why you've got resistance on the Russian side to what appears to be a fantastic deal that actually isn't a fantastic deal. I do think myself, again, it depends on numbers, that the whole tomahawk thing is vastly exaggerated. It depends on how many. Tomahawks are a potent weapon, but if you've only got a dozen or two, well, so what? It's not going to shift things. What matters is the number of men. What matters is the production of shells, the production of drones, GDP, and allies that are prepared to stump up. And note this, and I'm stopping on Ukraine now, the involvement since summer of American personnel in directing these drones, in directing these missiles. American satellites, American technicians, American military personnel sitting, I don't know where, in mid the United States directing these weapons. So America is involved. What you have got is, yes, quote unquote, Ukraine's drone fleet is an extension of Washington power. This is a proxy war. When you're directing missiles over someone else's territory and delivering it to a target, you are a co-belligerent. Russia is not wrong when it says that NATO is at war with it. It's low level, but it is war. Okay. I've got, in terms of my timing, I was going to deal with the climate tipping point. I was going to deal with two more things. I haven't got much time, so I'm going to limit myself very quickly. I think it's worthwhile talking. We've got an article on it. We've got the, at last, the documents from your party, all four of them. The idea that there's enough time, that there's enough space to seriously debate these things, to put forward amendments, to have some sort of, how should we put it, genuine process of where they go to the, this is clearly not the case. For all Jeremy Corbyn's article, in The Guardian, claiming to be, tremendously democratic, this is a travesty of democracy. You don't have a program, you don't have rules, you don't have standing orders, presented to a membership and then told, well, in a couple of weeks, we'll have a vote. And then a vote by who? A vote by atomized people sitting at home. A conference, I mean, I'm still amazed by it, of where they're not even having people staying there over the entire weekend. This isn't even something like the Tory party rally, of where you can get to know each other. By the time you get there, you're making way for the next lot that are coming through the front door. Anyway, just a couple of observations. Of course, we've got the leader. We object to Bonapartes. We reject emperors. We reject presidents. This isn't a democratic culture. We've got, as you would expect, the normal, we've got a central executive committee, must be 50% men, must be 50% women. We've got, again, as is predictable, the appointment of, what is it, a secretary, treasurer, political officer, spokesperson, chair, deputy chair, by this central committee, not from their own ranks, but from outside. So what you've got is a Mandarin class of professional left-wingers who will serve who? Will they be serving the central executive, or will they be serving the leader, or will they be serving, I don't know, Carrie Murphy? I suspect that what we're dealing with is the leader and Carrie Murphy being in charge, not the central executive of your party. Again, these are just a few comments I'm sort of throwing in the discussion, because we haven't got time. We're going to have a considered article in the Weekly Worker, and that isn't, of course, the last word on it. We have the, again, expected clauses about we favour debate, we favour robust exchanges of views, and then you've got, but of course this must be done in a respectful, comradely, non-abusive manner. Excuse me, I mean, I'm going to use, I'm sort of tempted to use an Anglo-Saxon. This is a recipe for banning people. This is a recipe for endless reporting people for saying the wrong thing, for looking, in the wrong way. You didn't quite say comrade in the right tone. You used the word comrade in a sneering fashion instead of a non-abusive way. I mean, we all know that when it comes to the House of Commons, I don't know about the House of Lords, I rarely listen to its debates, but we know that parliamentarians become very practiced in insulting the other side using parliamentary language. This is politics that we're dealing with. And once you introduce these clauses, of course, what it benefits is the power holders, not the ones that don't hold power. What you benefit is those who form the government of your party, not those who form the opposition of your party. And in that sense, I'm reminded, I mean, it's an anecdote I repeat, but sorry. I can remember in Left Unity, which had the same sort of stuff, they had a debate on banning heckling. Heckling, by the way, has a wonderful democratic, origin from the jute mills of Dundee. It's about, people reading newspapers, but it's also a wonderful democratic thing. Lenin was heckled by Bukharin. Martin Luther King was heckled and brings out wonderful lines, but apparently Left Unity couldn't stand being heckled. They ban heckling. We vote against it. I get up to speak on some other subject, and the mover, Liz Davis, who successfully won the motion of banning heckling, starts heckling me. And I just point to her, I say, Liz, you've just passed a motion banning heckling. I don't mind. I'm perfectly happy with your heckling. But heckling sort of is a natural human response if you disagree. Barracking someone, silencing someone, use a chair to calm it down, that's fine. But yeah, all of this stuff about respectful, comradely, non-abusive. Well, we know that abuse is in the eye of, the beholder, the listener, and all that. What else do we have? Conference, to the extent that it matters. It's going to have proposers, if you can get the requisite numbers, 3-minute speeches, 3 minutes moving it, 2 minutes seconding it, that sort of type stuff. I mean, again, seriously, can you really say hello in 3 minutes? I can't. You can't have a serious debate under those circumstances. You've got to have these things drawn out. You've got to have a prioritization of motions. You've got to give them time to have serious debate. And we've also got the standard one, unless it's, they've got a caveat, admittedly. But if it was debated last year, you can't debate it this year. All sorts of bureaucratic tricks, all sorts of bureaucratic devices. Leave aside the sortition and the OMOF zoomocracy. The conference is going to be a rally. That's what it's designed for. The branches, what about the branches? Well, again, open-ended. We're not quite sure what's going to, but I would just say this, worthwhile thinking about, comrades. To me, I was not surprised, but look, I used to be in the official CPGB. When I joined back in the 60s, 69, I joined the Young Commoners League. I was very young. In my town, we had a Young Commoners League branch. We had a town branch. We had industrial branches, though. I moved to Luton. We had 2 college branches. We had a Luton branch. We had a Dunstable branch. We also had a Skefco branch. We had a Dunstable Vauxhall branch. We had a Luton Vauxhall branch. Over the road from me, there's a huge building, sort of brutalist building. It's called a hospital. It employs thousands of people. It doesn't seem to have occurred to the organisers, the drafters of this constitution, this structure, that we would be doing something else other than standing in elections. Elections, great. We don't decry elections in the way that the SWP does and say real politics is on the streets. Real politics is strikes. Real politics can be standing in elections, talking in the council chamber, talking in the House of Commons. Yes, yes, yes. But also real politics is making the workplace, and we do have big workplaces still, into fortresses for socialism. I'm adapting a word here. Why not organize in local councils? Why not organize in big industrial plants? Why not organize, not only in the community, but in the work? It just doesn't seem to have occurred to the comrades. We also have other things like, if you want to change the constitution, it has to be two-thirds majority. Ridiculous. Why not a simple majority? Again, a barrier against democracy. To recall someone, a 40% vote. Another example of this putative bureaucracy entrenching itself. So what to do about it? Well, we've had, sadly, confirmation that membership will be open only to those who aren't members of a national party unless we think you're okay. Now, is the CPGB a real party? Well, not according to us, but we're not going to argue about it. What about other parties that are, registered with the Electoral Commission? Are they real parties? Well, maybe more than the CP. We can't use our name, by the way. The Electoral Commission barred us from doing. Socialist Party in England and Wales suffered a similar fate. Either way, we don't know who's barred. We don't know who's going to be allowed in, but it isn't needed at the moment. We're not dealing with a situation, in my view, of where, we're going to be flooded with Labour Party members who represent a threat. And my own take on what is behind this is that we ought to really just wise up here. The big threat that a lot of the bureaucrats and advocates of sortition, choosing delegates for what it's worth, by using delegates by lottery, fear is the SWP. Look, the SWP goes on every demonstration, every Palestine demonstration I've been on. There's the SWP with its stalls. There's the SWP sellers. There's a little SWP contingent. There they are at Freshers' Fair. They exist in society. The idea that all you need to do is put them in a your party meeting and all of these comrades sort of automatically fall under the sway of the SWP and join them. This is nonsense. The SWP has difficulty in maintaining its own organization. Most of its membership is fake. We all know it. What do they claim? 5,000 members, 2,000 paid dues. It's an organization that finds it extremely difficult to recruit, very difficult to retain. Maybe they would dominate this or that branch. Okay, maybe we are in a branch there and we argue against them. Maybe you do a deal. Maybe you form an alliance. This is called politics. We shouldn't fear arguments on the left or clashes of different factional positions. So I do think that this is a dangerous position, because what it does effectively, if it's implemented, is it sets up a witch hunt on day one. It reminds me in that sense, I fear the sort of results that we had in the Socialist Labour Party, with people on the door saying, are you a member of the CPGB? Or the real CPGB, I say real, of 1920s, of them being witch hunted out. Okay, just last comment on your party, and that is, of course, the bold declaration that it's a socialist party. Well, what do we mean by a social? What we mean by socialism is, in essence, what Jeremy Corbyn meant by socialism in both election manifestos, 2017, for the many, not least, And what that is a nicer, kinder, fairer capitalism. That's actually what Y Party is committed to. And we socialists ought to be fighting for genuine socialism, which is the rule of the working class and the transition globally, not in Britain, not even just in Europe, but globally towards a communist system. Lastly, in my no minutes remaining, sad to announce for comrades who knew him that Phil Kent, our old layout artist and printer, has died at the age of 83. I've written an obituary of the comrade. He was a fine communist, a cantankerous, awkward person on many occasions. But I have to say that I've not met anyone, not only in our own ranks, but outside our ranks, who've not had anything but a good word to say about Phil. So he was loved very widely, by comrades who knew him. On the left, he was extremely hardworking. He could get into a grump, but his grumps only lasted 5 minutes. And what was remarkable to me about Phil is that, given that he had, dyslexia, he couldn't. His spelling was worse than mine. He got into university, and not only that, he was able to master our Komori print machine extremely quickly, and then mastered, U-Design or whatever it is to do the paper each week. Dedicated, hardworking, a talented comrade. And if you've got memories of Phil, if you want to put a letter in, into the Weekly Worker, that would be very much appreciated. Details, about a get together and all the rest of it will follow. But yeah, I've written an obituary, and it will be in this week's paper. Thank you, Stan.